Okay, let's continue with the next part. Okay, the next part we look at words that you need to use when you want to show obligation or necessity. Okay, obligation and necessity, they are almost the same. Maksudnya benda yang kamu perlu buat. Okay, so kamu nak buat benda tu, apa perkataan yang kamu sepatutnya guna. Prohibition, this one is larangan, benda yang kamu tak boleh buat. Possibility is kemungkinan. Deduction is something like kamu buat kesimpulan berdasarkan fakta-fakta atau benda yang ada. Advice, nasihat. Criticism ni kritik lah, atau bahasa mudahnya kamu nak kecam orang itu. Okay, now to show obligation and necessity, you would be using must, have to, or need to express obligation. So we must use must for the present or future, and we can use have to and need to for the present, past or future. So ingat, have to and need to untuk present, past or future, tetapi must for the present and future. Okay, so have to and need to, you can use it for the present, past or future, but must, you use it for present and the future. We must find the murderer, benda yang sekarang. I've never had to go to prison, benda tu tak berlaku kan. You will need to lock up your valuables, this one is future, it has not happened yet. Okay, next, I'm looking at this part. We use don't have to or don't need to or needn't to talk about something that is not necessary. Benda yang tak perlu, benda yang tak perlu buat. You don't need to call the sheriff. Sheriff tu pegawai polis lah. Okay, luar negara dia orang guna perkataan sheriff. Di Malaysia, we just call them police. Okay, you don't have to call the sheriff. You needn't call the sheriff. So this is to show that benda ni tak perlu dibuat. We use didn't have to or didn't need to for something unnecessary in the past. So yang tadi tu present, I would say present, this one is in the past. Okay, we don't know if it was done or not. Kita tak tahu benda tu berlaku, siap ataupun tak siap. I didn't have to pay a fine. I didn't need to pay a fine. Maksudnya kamu tak perlu bayar denda. Okay, so benda tu tidak berlaku. We use needn't have. Okay, we use needn't have for something that was done in the past, although it was unnecessary. Maksudnya di sini sesuatu perbuatan yang telah berlaku, tetapi benda tu sebenarnya tak perlu. Look at the example here. I needn't have given back the money I borrowed. Sebenarnya duit yang kamu pinjam tu kamu tak perlu bagi balik, tapi kamu bagi balik. Okay, so sebenarnya mungkin orang yang bagi pinjam duit kita tak payah bagi balik, tapi kamu rasa kamu perlu bagi balik, walaupun orang tu cakap tak perlu. Okay, so you use needn't have for that. Okay, now prohibition. Okay, very simple, you use mustn't to say something that is not allowed, benda yang tak boleh buat, senang, larangan. You mustn't be late for meetings with your probation officer. You mustn't be late for classes. You mustn't be late for your exams. Okay, semua benda yang tak boleh buat, kamu guna mustn't or must not. Now, possibility, kemungkinan. We use may, might, or could to express possibility in the present or in the future. We do not use could in negative sentences. Okay, so ingat, kita tak akan gunakan could dalam ayat yang bermaksud negatif, yang tak akan berlaku. Okay, benda yang akan mungkin berlaku, then you can use could. For example, in this example, this footprint may, might, or you can even use could be important. The lights are not on. They may not be home, or you might say they might not be home. You do not say they could be home. No. Okay. So ingat itu. The next part. We use may or might or could plus have and past participle to talk about possibility in the past. So past participle, I think we have looked at this topic before. You can go and revise it in your grammar notes. We do not use could have in negative sentences. Again, sama macam tadi, could have ni tak guna dalam ayat yang negatif. The lights were all off. Okay, there may, might, could have been a power cut. So past tense. Okay, so past tense, okay, menunjukkan benda tu mungkin telah berlaku pada satu masa yang telah berlalu. Okay, it was quite dark. Again, past. He may or might not have seen the robbers clearly. So this is the participle. Okay, please remember your participle so that you'll be able to understand how to use modals together with the participle for a possibility in the past. Deduction. Okay, as I said just now, deduction is something like making conclusion or buat kesimpulan. We use must or can to show that we are almost certain. Apa maksud almost certain? Almost certain maksudnya kamu hampir-hampir pasti yang benda tu betul atau benda tu tidak betul. So is or is not true. He's got blood on his hand. Apa maksudnya blood on his hand? Tangan dia ada darah. He must be the murderer. He must be the murderer. Again, kamu hanya hampir pasti dan bukan 100% pasti. Another example, she can't be the robber. She was with me at the time of the robbery. Okay, dia tak mungkin jadi perompak kerana semasa rompakan tu berlaku dia ada dengan saya. So kemungkinan tu sangat sikit je untuk dia jadi perompak tu. Okay, next part. We use must, can or couldn't plus have and past participle to talk about the past. He had to pay a fine. He must have broken the law. So this is the participle. Alright. Participle. Again, this is to talk about the past. Kenapa? He had to pay a fine. Past tense. Benda dah berlaku. You can't or couldn't have seen Jacob in the city centre. He's in prison serving a life sentence. Kamu tak mungkin nampak dia di pusat bandar kerana dia berada di penjara untuk hukuman sepanjang hidup dia. Okay, so this is to talk about the past. So yang ni, situasi ayat ni, macam ayat ni, mungkin kamu pergi bandar dan kamu nampak seseorang. Kemudian kamu balik dan kamu bagi tahu kawan kamu, aku nampak orang tu tadi. Dan kawan kamu reply, mustahil kamu nampak dia tadi kerana dia berada di penjara. So peristiwa yang kamu konon-kononnya nampak orang tu telah berlaku. Okay, and lastly, when you want to give advice or make criticism, okay, you use should and ought to. Benda yang tak paksa. Okay, you are not forcing. Okay, tak paksa orang tu. Okay, so kamu hanya nak bagi nasihat. Okay, so you should use should or ought to have followed by the past participle to give advice. To give criticism. Just now is to give advice. For example, you should or ought to report him to the police. He shouldn't have robbed that bank. Ini criticism lah. Ini bukan nasihat. Yang nasihat is this one. Advice. This one is criticism. Okay, so please remember advise, you use should or ought to. When you want to criticize, you use should or ought to followed by have and the participle. Okay, so you would need to read your grammar notes, the back of your textbook, for more explanation. So if you don't understand, please ask me.